الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا فمن بعد. My brothers and sisters, we were talking about the issue of investment versus sacrifice. And I mentioned to you in the last class that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned how He loves a slave of His and what happens because of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, I mentioned to you the reason why I want you to differentiate between these two words, investment and sacrifice, and how what we spend in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not sacrifice but investment. Because on this is a return. There is nothing that a slave spends in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on which there is no return. And when we have a return on something, then it is not a sacrifice, it is an investment. Now, what is this investment? And what is the return on this investment? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم من جاء بالحسنة فله عشر أمثالها ومن جاء بالسيئة فلا يجزى إلا مثلها وهم لا يظلمون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, whoever brings a good deed, which is obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whichever way, that person will have 10 times the like thereof to his credit. And whoever brings an evil deed, which is disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the mercy of my Rabb Jalla Jalaluhu, that person will have only the recompense of the like thereof, and they will not be wrong. Which means that for every good deed, we will get 10 times the reward. Whereas for any evil deed, we will get at the most equal to that. Now, that does not mean we become complacent. It does not mean that it's okay to do evil, because we do not have the capacity even to bear the punishment for one single evil deed. Because the punishment for one single evil deed could be that we are put into Jahannam. No matter for what period of time we are put there, it is something which is completely and totally impossible for a human being to bear. And therefore, being complacent about that, feeling that, oh, this is okay, it's only one deed. No, this is it's a sign of foolishness. It's a sign, and at the extreme level, it would be a sign of kufr, because we are making light of the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the point of mentioning this, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, is to demonstrate His mercy and His kindness and His forgiveness. Not for us to relax and imagine that therefore it is okay to do evil. No, it's not okay to do evil. It is not the nature of the believer that he or she deliberately does something which is disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what is the one word for obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what is the guarantee that whatever it is that I'm doing is obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and will earn His pleasure? What is that one word? That one word is the Sunnah. Right? And one word is the Sunnah. Now let's see how about some more explanation of ROI, return on investment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Baqarah, مثل الذين ينفقون أموالهم في سبيل الله كمثل حبة أنبتت 7 سنابل في كل سنبلة 100 حبة والله يضاعف لمن يشاء والله واسع عليم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the example, the likeness, the similarity, the similitude of those who spend their wealth in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like the likeness, it's like the example of one grain of corn, one single seed of corn. If you plant it, it grows 7 years, and each year has 100 grains. So what is this proportion that we are being told? That one grain gives you 700 grains. Now, which means that one good deed, one thing you do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you 700 times the reward. Then Allah says, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not count and gives. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and Allah gives manifold increase. Yudha'ifu liman yasha, who gives manifold increase to whom He pleases. How much increase? In keeping with His majesty and grace. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all sufficient for His creatures' needs, and He is the all-knower. Allah knows the needs, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can satisfy and be sufficient for all of them, and Allah is sufficient for all of them. So minimum, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying 1:10. Then He said 1:700. And then Allah is saying that these numbers are only because you understand numbers. But as far as Allah is concerned, Allah does not count out the thing like cash. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives in keeping with His majesty and grace. Allah does not count. He counted for us because we like numbers. And then He says, in keeping with His majesty and grace, Allah gives manifold increase to whom He pleases. Now, brothers and sisters, the final point on return on investment, the value of the return is based on its quantum and who is guaranteeing it, right? That is why, for example, U.S. Treasury bonds, which is U.S. dollars 10,000, attract a lot of investment. USD 10K, which is, it attracts a lot of investment, even though the return, the interest rate, is only 3%, right, or maybe less. That's because people consider the US government to be a solid generator or solid guarantor of investment. Ask myself and request you to ask yourself, then what about Allah? And that too, when the return is not 3%, but 700 times, not percent, 700 times. And then we shall see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, He increases as He wishes. The very important thing to understand is that this is where the rubber meets the road, where you wake up and smell the coffee. Let us ask ourselves, how much do I really believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It looks like a dumb question, but seriously, we have to ask ourselves this question and say, how much do I really believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How much do I really believe the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then look for the answer in our own lives and decisions and actions. If I believe that one day I will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I really believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deliver on His guarantee, then this must reflect in my investment with Him. Now, does that happen? Does that happen? Because if I believe, if I'm investing, and I believe that my investment, I need the return on this investment. I am investing, and I believe that this place where I'm investing is the best place for this investment. I believe the authority which is guaranteeing me that investment. Then what will you look for? If you say, if I'm promoting this, I'm saying you must do this, and this is a guarantee and a beautiful investment, so you will say, well, how much have you invested? So I said, no, but I haven't invested. I'm telling you, you should invest. There's no traction in that, right? It doesn't make any sense. Because if I really believe that, then how come I have not invested? If I really believe it, I must invest. If I'm not investing, then it shows that I really don't believe. And that is very important. That is why we must reflect and say that if I really believe that Allah will deliver on His guarantee, then this must reflect in my investment with Him. Now, does it? I'm not talking faith. I'm talking accounting, or rather the two together. This is reality. This is reality. It's not just belief, right? Ask anyone working in the Middle East why he sends money home to India, why he lives in a small apartment in Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or somewhere, but builds a palatial house in Hyderabad or Karachi or wherever he is, India, Pakistan, or wherever, whichever country, or somewhere else in the Middle East. That too, when the reality is that this person will spend 35 to 40 years in that small flat and then retire and come home to India at the age of 65 or 70, and will most likely not live for another 35 or 40 years. And if he comes home to India at the age of 70, he's not going to live to be 110. Yet he does that because he considers India or whichever country he comes from to be his permanent home, right? He considers that to be his permanent home. So even though he is living in the Middle East And I'm saying Middle East because people who go to America and so on, they settle down there. But in the Middle East, they don't give you citizenship and stuff. So you have to go back. I mean, there's no, no doubt about that. So even though he's living in the Middle East for by far the majority of his life, he does not invest there. He does not buy property there. He invests back home, wherever that home is, whichever home country. Now, what about the akhirah? Do we consider this to be permanent? And if it is permanent, then what is our investment in that akhirah? This is the question that you and I need to ask ourselves, right? I seriously want you to think about these things. I want you to talk about them with your family and to make them real for yourself. As I mentioned, what we talk about frequently becomes real. And that is the principle behind all advertising and propaganda, for example, which is another form of advertising anyway. Talk about that thing over and over and over until it becomes real. And that's why the example I always give, and I think yesterday also in another class I gave some example, which is that even though something like global warming is a huge and present and critical danger, it seems unreal to us because we don't talk about it. Whereas something else, take COVID for example. People are living in fear of COVID. Uh, I'm not saying it is not real, it is real. But compared to that, global warming can result in the complete annihilation of the entire human race. But it seems like just words for us. Water shortage. Today, water is being traded in the futures market on the stock exchange in California. It's that critical. But how many of us turn off taps? How many of us have installed water saving taps in our homes and in public places where we control that? Right? So things that we don't talk about, even if they are real, they seem to be unreal. But things which are, for example, I mean, this COVID is one. We constantly talking COVID, COVID, COVID the whole time. It has become so real that people now, it's like you're living in a phobia, of sort of pall of fear, fearing COVID. Whereas if somebody asks you this question and says, "What is the worst that can happen?" Well, I can die. Well, you will die anyway, right? You will die anyway. Also, if you look at the actual absolute numbers, I'm not talking about these ticker tapes of stuff. Actual numbers, how many people died of COVID, and if you say in that period of time, how many people died of heart disease, how many people died of cancer, and so on and so forth, because all of those are they are slower to work, and whereas this one is more immediate. So this, because we talk about this so often, it becomes so real for us. Whereas the other stuff, we don't talk about it often, so it becomes unreal. And that's why the question to ask ourselves is, how many times a day do we talk about the akhirah? May Allah protect us. I don't even know if we talk about it. If I say how many times a week, how many times a day is probably too quick. My brothers and sisters, therefore, let us make this something for us to do, which is, let us talk about Jannah. Let us talk about the benefits of following Sunnah. Let us talk about the benefits of obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And let us talk about the immediate benefits of that in this life and in the akhirah, both. Because if we do not see the benefit of something in our present life, simply to talk about it in terms of the akhirah, that in the future this will happen and that will happen, is something that I don't know. Probably it doesn't. It doesn't get us that motivation, right? May Allah protect us from ourselves. Somehow just talking about the akhirah, for the Sahaba, the akhirah was the thing. They didn't worry about the dunya, but for us, the dunya is so real that the akhirah, if we only talk about that, then getting people to get motivated to do the right thing seems more difficult. So I'm saying, look at it also in terms of its benefit in this life, in the world. Now, the beauty is that there is a benefit. I mean, the Sunnah of Rasulullah, the following of Islam, the living of Islam, actually has been. You don't have to manufacture or invent stuff. It has benefit for us in this dunya as well as in the akhirah. And therefore, it is very important for us to talk about that. Sit with your children, sit with your families, mention this, make it real for us. Another very good way is to cultivate friends to whom all of this makes sense, for whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and meeting Him is real, and who love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Cultivate such friendships and gather with these friends and their families. Now, don't go into it immediately in this COVID times, but when you can do that outside of COVID, do that. But now, do it remotely. Talk about maybe have Zoom sessions or something. Talk on the phone, things like this, where you meet with such friends who are who love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who talk about that. But don't make this into kitty parties kind of or stack parties kind of things. Include your children in them. That is very, very important. That's your guarantee for yourself. If your children are not introduced to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they are not introduced to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if your children are strangers to them, if Allah and His Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam are strangers, then the chances that you are going to that those children are going to make dua for you and this and that, those chances become very slim. So make sure that you include your children in these meetings that you have, which are to talk about the glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to talk about the beauty of the Sunnah of His Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then think about where you spend your free time today and what that is likely to earn for you. And then start this and see what you reap as your harvest when you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today we seem to spend our free time at best in things which are of no value, zero value. So we are not minus, but we are also not plus. Now, really speaking, there is no zero value because time is being spent. So if I'm spending my time in an activity which has zero value, then I'm really minus. Now, at best, I might say, well, I didn't commit any sin. So, for example, if I'm sitting and watching football, or I'm watching basketball, I'm watching cricket or something, I can say, well, I'm not committing a sin. I'm not missing my salah and so on. At salah time, I'm getting up and praying. I'm not watching something haram. But what did you gain by watching that football or cricket or whatever it was for that 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it was? What did you gain? Really seriously ask yourself the question. Say, I spent this much of time. Instead of that, if I had read a good book, I would have enjoyed that beautifully, far more than I would enjoy this football. And I would have gained because I would have got some knowledge out of it. Right? Instead of watching this stuff, if you like to watch, for example, if you watch a good documentary on something important, or I like to watch wildlife and natural history things. So subhanallah, for me that's like making the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens my mind and my eyes to His creation. So I love watching that. So that time now I'm spending those 2 hours watching BBC, BBC World or Green Planet Earth or whatever it was, right? Now that time is well spent because Alhamdulillah, I'm looking at the khudrat of Allah and continuously I'm making dhikr. I'm saying Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, 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 because of the beauty and magnificence of the creation of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala that I'm watching. Okay, so now depends on what you want to do. If you like to watch, if you like to read, I love reading. So reading a good book. I love to write, so I spend my time writing. I love wildlife photography, so I spend some time, looking. Again, we are seeing the khudrat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the lens of a camera, on the television and so on and so forth. So do something which is valuable and useful. So even if you are doing something which is not a sin, right? I'm not trying to make your life difficult. So I'm not saying that everything is haram. No, it's not. I'm just trying to see how can you make your life more valuable and more useful and more beneficial for yourself. So if you say that I am spending 2 hours or 3 hours and I'm doing that just watching some game, what is the value of that? Nothing, zero. So if you have spent 3 hours and the value is zero, then you're actually minus. It's not at zero, it's minus. So therefore, we must try and make our time valuable. Brothers and sisters, the Sahaba, there are so many stories about the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajmain, for whom the Akhirah was real. Right? For whom the Akhirah was real. Suhaib Rumi radiallahu anhu was one of the great Sahaba of Rasulullah. He was called, his name was Suhaib, and he was called a Rumi, the Roman, because he used to speak Arabic with a sort of Roman accent or Latin accent. And the reason he did that, he was actually from Yemen. The reason that happened to him was because when he was living in Yemen, his father was a local chieftain. His mother took him one day when he was a little boy. His mother took him one day to a seaside resort for a holiday, and the Romans raided that place because there was this constant war between the Romans and the Persians, and Yemen was in Persian control. So one night the Romans raided that place and they captured little Suhaib radiallahu anhu, and they took him away. They sold him as a slave. Some Roman guy bought him, and he stayed in his house. He learned to speak Latin. So his Arabic was had this accent, was tainted with this Roman accent. Then somebody from Makkah bought him, and he landed in Makkah. He was a very intelligent person, and he was good at business. So he told his Arab owner, he said to him that, look, instead of making me do some manual work and so on, why don't you allow me to set up a trading house for you, and we'll split the profit. So whatever the proportion was, the man agreed. He said, okay. For him it was good. Instead of simply having a warm body as a slave, here was the slave earning money for him. So he says, free money. So Suhaib Rumi radiallahu anhu, he set up this business, and he used to do business, he used to trade and so on and so forth, and he became very wealthy. He made a lot of money for his master, he made money for himself as well. Now, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, talking about the reality of Jannah, how real is Jannah. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then came and he started preaching Islam. And Suhaib Rumi radiallahu anhu, he heard him and he accepted Islam. Then came the time when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made hijrah to Medina. Now Suhaib Rumi wanted to go, but his slave master didn't want him to leave because this man was worth money for him, so he didn't want him to go. So he put guards on him who were supposed to ensure that he didn't leave Makkah. One night, Suhaib Rumi radiallahu anhu gave them the slip, and he took off for Makkah, for Medina. Now, but very quickly they realized that he had escaped. So they set out in pursuit of him, and so now he's going across. Imagine, 450 kilometers of desert and wilderness. Suhaib Rumi radiallahu anhu is ahead. These people are pursuing him. Eventually, they got up very close to him, and he feared that they would be able to capture him. At that point, there was a hillock. A rocky hillock, and Suhaib Rumi radiallahu anhu, he climbed this hill and got on top and hid behind some rocks. And these people, they surrounded him. So now it was a stalemate. So he is on top of this hill, he can't go anywhere. They have surrounded him. So he said to them, he was also a famous archer. So he said to them, I have arrows in my quiver, with each one of you, your name written on this arrow. So if you want to come to capture me, please come, and I will, each one of you, your name is on one arrow, meaning that I will take you out if you come to me. So now they were stuck. Now what do you do? How long is he going to stay there? How long are they going to stay there? So Suhaib Rumi radiallahu anhu, he said to them, he said, I'll tell you what. You want to capture me because you are afraid that if I go away, then my money, whatever I have accumulated and so on and so forth, you will lose it. So he said, instead of that, what? Let me tell you. Here's a deal. He said, my deal is, I will tell you where I have kept my money in Makkah. Right? I'll give you the location where I have hidden it. You go and take the money, let me go. They said, okay. So he told them such and such a place in Makkah. They all left him and they went away. Now think about this. Think about this story. If you were one of those people, and if the person you were pursuing tells you this story and says that, look, I've got all this money secreted in this particular place, go and collect it, let me go. Will you let him go? What would you do? You know what I would do? I would send one person to check out whether this is true or not. And then maybe if that person checks out and then comes back and informs me or send me some message to say, look, I got the money, it is here, then I would let this person go. I would not just let the person go just on his word. Unless what? Unless I was absolutely 100% certain that this person would not tell a lie. That this person is and can only speak the truth. So what does it tell you? Here are a bunch of people. We are not talking about his friend. We are talking about his enemies who are after him, who want to capture him, who want to kill him. But those enemies have so much respect for the truthfulness of the Muslim that when the Muslim gives them his word, they take his word. They do not doubt. What does that tell you about the akhlaq of the Muslims? Now, brothers and sisters, these stories are not just for us to listen to and be happy about. There is a huge lesson in terms of what do we need to do to inculcate these values in our lives today. Today, we have reached a stage. Let me complete the story before we go to this. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, now Suhaib or Rumi Radhalan, he completed, he finished his journey, he came down off the hill, went off to Medina, because now nobody is chasing him. When he reached Medina, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had already informed Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam about all the events, about what happened. So when he reached Medina, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says to him, Suhaib, you made a very good bargain. He said, you made a very good bargain. Right? You made a very good bargain. What was the bargain? He lost everything he had in this life, in this world. His complete wealth, totally, he had nothing else. He only had his arms and his clothes. All his wealth was in Makkah and that he gave away. In exchange for what? In exchange for La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. This is the value of the kalima, my brothers and sisters. How many of us are today, how many of us are there today who will give everything we own in exchange for La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah? Everything except the clothes on the body. I mean, that's not even except, meaning that, okay, you are allowed to have that. How many of us will give half of that? Half of what we own. How many of us will give a quarter of that? How many of us will give 1/10 of that? How many of us will give 1/100 of that? There are people, Muslims today, who try to trick, na'udhu billah, who try to trick Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with respect to zakat. 2.5% of wealth, not even income. 2.5%. Where is the question of 10%? Even 2.5% to give, we feel hesitant. There are Muslims who don't want to give and who are reluctant to give. And here we are talking about Muslims who gave everything and gave that gladly. No compulsion. What do we have to say for ourselves? Brothers and sisters, let's think about this. Today, we have reached a stage where sometimes you feel that we can never come out of this. Now that is, first and foremost, if you are thinking that way, I would say stop thinking that way. That is despair, that is hopelessness, which in Islam is haram. There's no way. A Muslim is not somebody who is hopeless about anything, because we trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do whatever He wants. And therefore, Allah will do whatever He wants, and we are not worried and bothered about anything. So Alhamdulillah. So that is the first and foremost thing. If you are in that frame of mind where you say, "Oh, but what can I do?" and so on, so on. No, we can do much, and we can, inshallah, uh, Alhamdulillah, uh, we can do uh, a great deal, and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, inshallah, will help us. So that is the first and foremost thing to understand. But the point is to think about this and say that how did we reach here? How did we reach a stage where today we are, as Muslims, we are the weakest and the most despised, most disliked, most hated, most oppressed people in the whole world? Right? Muslim blood has no value, Muslim lives have no value. Uh, People don't even count anymore. If you just say in the last, one decade or say last 20 years from 2000 onwards, how many Muslims, and I'm not talking about, I'm saying innocent Muslim men, women, children, how many have been killed in the many places in which there are wars, and these wars are being fought against Muslims for no reason other than that they are Muslim. Right? There's not even any count anymore. There's so many have died. How did this happen? Think about this. Because think about this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned this very clearly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma bi qawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change the good condition of people until they change it themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't take, say for example, there's a bunch of people who are good people, who are doing good, who are, who are beneficial to everyone around them. They are pious, they worship only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they do not join partners with Him, they do not commit shirk, they don't do any of that. But however, suddenly one day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides, okay, let me throw a spanner in the works, let me destroy them, let me, give them some problems, and let me disrupt their lives. Allah does not do this. Allah does not do this. How does decline happen? Decline happens because those people themselves bring it upon themselves. Instead of being focused on the acquisition of knowledge, they get focused on the acquisition of luxury. Instead of being focused on hard work and development and progress, they get focused on just enjoyment. Spending money on things rather than spending money on effort. Just think about that. Take our countries, take our Muslim spend in whichever way you want to calculate that, as individuals, as countries, as whatever, and see how much money do Muslims spend on luxuries and how much money do Muslims spend on, for example, medical research, or for example, establishing of good and great universities. How many in a year? How many research papers are coming out of universities from Muslim countries? How many books in science and technology are being written by Muslim scientists? How many Muslims are winning the Nobel Prize for science, for example? Right? I'm not talking about other things. I'm focused on science. Tell me how many people in the world, when they have problems, they have different issues. Say, for example, there's economic collapse and so on. We like to talk about Islamic finance and so on, right? So tell me how many people from Wall Street, how many great investors, George Soros and so on and so forth, right? How many of these people have approached Islamic universities to say, please come and teach us Islamic finance? What is Islamic finance? You people say that you've got a financial system which is not subject to these vagaries of ups and downs. So come and teach us that. You know why they don't tell you that? They don't tell you that because in your countries you have got interest-based banking. So what will they ask you for? What will they ask you for? I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but there's not one single uh, Muslim country. I'm talking about, in any case, all the big names. I don't know about Mauritania, for example, but other than that, I'm saying um, there's not one single Muslim country which does not have interest-based banking, legal, and in most cases, the governments of those countries are partners in that banking system. And we know very well that interest-based banking is something on which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared war. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised to destroy it. يَمْحَقُ اللَّهُ الرِّبَى وَيُرْبِي صَدَقَاتِ. Allah said definitely Allah will destroy interest-based banking. So how will anybody ask you for a solution to the problems created by interest-based banking? Seriously, my brothers and sisters, we have to ask ourselves this question. Right? And say that if we really want to understand how we got here, then we have to understand what we did. And in one word, what we did was we left the Sunnah of Rasulullah. We disobeyed Allah because we left the Sunnah of Rasulullah. And as I say, the rest is history. Now, again, I'm not saying this for you to lose hope, because think about this. We didn't get here overnight. This took time. This took a lot of time. From the beginning, if I count, we were doing well for 600 to 700 years. And then we declined, we came down. And if we take the 1920s would be the last, the Ottoman Empire was finished in 1923. So if we take 1920, now we are 2020. So 100 years. That's it. If you go further back from where the decline started, maybe 200 or 300 years. So it's not as if we have been here forever. We've not been here forever. We have a beautiful history of having contributed enormously to this world in many different ways. People who want to forget it cannot forget it. That is the extent of our contribution. Alhamdulillah. But sitting on our laurels is not going to help. Number one. Number two, also just talking about it, it's not going to help. Talking about our glorious past, having this exhibition, that exhibition, it is good. We should do this. I'm not against it. We should do this because we should know where we are, what we are. We should know, that we are people who, alhamdulillah, we do good things, and we have done good things. We have a good record. So it's nice to know that. But just leaving it there is not sufficient. We have to revive that. By changing our ways, by using our time productively, by focusing on, the first thing is on focusing on Tawheed and Risala, which is focusing on worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone without partners, meaning remove all the shirk and bid'ah from our lives and bring our lives on the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And second thing is then focusing on science and technology, because this is the age of science and technology. If we leave science and technology, we are going to go backwards. We are already backward, we'll go even worse. So focusing on science and technology is absolutely critical. We need to do that. And inshallah, if we do these two things simultaneously, they have to go hand in hand. We cannot be focused on science and technology and then leave Allah and His Rasul. No. And we cannot say I'm focusing only on my piety and science and technology. I will not read, I will not study. Both are not acceptable. You need to have these two things hand in hand together. Then inshallah we can look forward once again to a golden age which is not described and which is not dependent on the amount of possessions we have, The golden age is not because we are wearing gold cloth. The golden age is the golden age because our contribution to the rest of the world is gold in every way. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us the kind of contributing people we used to be, and better and more. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save us from ourselves and to save us from our base desires and to save us from becoming the slaves of our desires. وصلى الله على نبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.